English Class 10. Dear Departed, question and answer. Question 1. What precaution had the Slaters taken before the arrival of the Jordans? Answer. Mrs. Slater was a very cunning and greedy woman who had loved her father's belongings more than her father himself. Before the arrival of her sister Mrs. Jordan and her husband, she had pinched her father's bureau and his wall clock. She made her husband make use of her father's new pair of slippers. Question 2. How can you gallivanting about in the street with your grandfather lying dead and cold upstairs? Bring out the irony in Mrs. Slater's comment. Answer. Even though Mrs. Slater's was in mourning dress, she had no real mourning feelings for her departed father. From the way she blames her daughter Victoria for being unaffected by her grandfather's death and seeking pleasure in the neighborhood, it becomes evident that her very attitude and her pretension are closely ironical. Question 3. Why was Mrs. Slater a little nervous about the Jordans' arrival? Answer. Mrs. Slater was a little nervous about the arrival of her sister Elizabeth and her husband Ben Jordan for a couple of reasons. First, she was worried if her sister would blame her for calling for another doctor for their departed father. She was nervous if her sister would demand some of their father's belongings that she had placed eyes upon. Elizabeth's coming being after a feud 3 years ago, she was also worried if there would be another feud to follow. Besides all this, she was nervous if Elizabeth and Ben would come in a better mourning dress. Question 4. And Ben and Elizabeth will never have thought about mourning yet, so we will outshine them there. How was Mrs. Slater planning to outshine the Jordans? Answer. Before the arrival of the Jordans, Henry, Amelia and Victoria had a proper mourning dressing. While Amelia was in a black gown, Henry strolled into a black tailcoat, black tie and a grey trousers. Victoria, their daughter, put on a white frock and white sash to match the occasion. Question 5. Why did Henry doubt the Jordans' arrival at all? Answer. Henry doubted the Jordans attending the funeral at all because the two families had not been on good terms for years, and the two ladies, his wife and her sister, had such a terrible fight over looking after their father, and Mrs. Jordan had plainly said that she didn't want anything that her father owned. Question 6. I suppose it is in the family. What did Henry mean by this? Answer. Henry is a flat man, not giving any thought to what he speaks. On hearing his wife mentioning Elizabeth's habit of getting harder for money, Henry comments that Elizabeth has got this attitude from her father, for a while forgetting that the same applied to his wife as well. Question 7. They will stretch, won't they? I am not going to have them wasted. What is being referred to here? What is the context? Answer. A pair of slippers that Mr. Abel had very recently bought is being referred here. Mrs. Slater is such a stingy woman that she wanted her husband wear these chappals so that they will stretch and will fit his feet. Question 8. Why did the Slaters bring the bureau down before the arrival of the Jordans? Answer. The bureau was a fine piece of furniture and was recently bought and used by Mr. Abel, the old man believed to be dead. It was evident that the Jordans had no idea about the bureau, as they had made their last visit before the bureau was bought. By bringing the bureau down and by carrying the drawers up, the Slaters meant to own the bureau. Question 9. What do you make of Mr. Slater's character? Answer. Mr. Henry Slater was a wooden puppet. He was not as shrewd as his wife, yet he could be most effectively manipulated and bent. Maybe he lived most of his life with such a woman. He had acquired a very cheap character, not even able to correct his greedy wife when he knew she did something cheap. Question 10. Are we pinching it before Aunt Elizabeth comes? What were they pinching? How was that pinching? What does this reveal about Victoria's character? Answer. They were pinching Mr. Abel's bureau. It was an act of pinching because the bureau belonged to Mr. Abel. This reveals Victoria's innocent character. Probably she was different from her mother and father, yet she too was helpless. Question 11. That was a near thing. Open the door, Victoria. What was a near thing? Answer. The near thing mentioned here is the Slaters carrying the bureau down before the Jordans had come in. While the Jordans were waiting at the door, knocking, the Slaters were bringing the bureau in great hurry. Question 12. How did the Slaters and the Jordans respond to Mr. Abel's death? Answer. The Slaters and the Jordans were excited over the death of Mr. Abel, the father of the two women. As custom demanded, they put on mourning clothes and pretended to be sad, but soon they began to behave quite happily. Question 13. Why was Mr. Abel glad that his bureau had been brought downstairs? Answer. Mr. Abel, though very old for another marriage, had been all prepared to get married to a widow. After seeing that his daughters didn't really love him and that their eyes had been upon his assist, Mr. Abel decided to leave his daughter's house with all his furniture. He was glad to see that his bureau had been brought down. Question 14. Why did Mr. Abel decide to make a new will? Answer. Mr. Abel decided to make a new will because he saw very clearly that his daughter didn't at all love him and therefore didn't deserve his assets as well. He wanted his wealth passed to someone who would lovingly take care of him in his old age and thus decided to make a new will. Question 15. Justify the title of the play. Answer. Dear Departed is a satire that criticizes the peripheral relations and showy love between parents, siblings and children. Though the title itself appears to be an emotional one, it soon becomes clear that the dear departed is not Mr. Abel, father of Amelia and Elizabeth. What departed them dearly was their father's assets and belongings. What the two daughters and their husbands had waited for was the death of Mr. Abel, not his well-being. They never loved him. The two daughters fought with each other not for making their father feel at home, but to get him rid of. The poor old man learnt the true nature of his children's love too late, but was able to escape their cruel hospitality and cunning care for him. Question 16. How does the author bring out the modern world's insensitivity to the old and dying? Answer. The play moves around an old man, Mr. Abel, and his greedy daughters for whom nothing like he was dear but his property, his assets and his wealth. They pretended to be loving and being concerned for him for his wealth. Though Mr. Abel was not a wealthy man, yet he had those things for which his daughters could die and kill. The play satirizes modern instances of children pretending to be taking care of their parents. As long as there are parents, they die with something that they had earned in life, and sons and daughters eager to get possession of it. The cruel aspect is that heirs wait for their parents to die as early as possible and blame it on the parents' misbehavior, acute illness and a dozen others. Heirs, who live with their aging parents, are the ones who pretend the most to be the worthy heirs and to escape the brothers and sisters who wait to find fault. They do a lot of showy concern for their parents, and this adversely affect the aged ones. Both the Slaters and the Jordans did their part so well that they were two devils in the disguise of ideal daughters. Apart from hating each other, they proved that they hated their father. Mr. Abel was a burden for them. Had it not been for his property and other assets, they would have thrown him into the streets years ago. Question 17. How do Amelia and Henry give an account of Mr. Abel's death? Answer. Mr. Abel was found merry in the morning, probably he was a bit drunk. After a while he went to the insurance office and probably paid the dues. He spent the rest of his day at ring-o-bells and returned at night. Once home, he went straight away into his room and lay on bed and slept. Later Henry went upstairs and Mr. Abel, half asleep, asked him to remove his shoes. When the dinner was over, Amelia went upstairs with a bit of food in a tray and found the old man lying dead in the bed.
If you like the video, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe the channel for more videos. Thank you.